Hello, fellow humans. Two big ideas are coming together: degrowth and limitarianism. These ideas are at the core of the economic system which I called the economy for life, that could eventually replace capitalism. Degrowth is an expansion of social agency and well-being for all humans within the limits of Earth through a selective reduction of production and consumption to lighten ecological footprint, planned democratically in the spirit of social justice. Limitarianism advocates that it is not morally permissible to have more resources than are needed to fully flourish in life. Limitarianism views having riches or wealth to be the state in which one has more resources than are needed for maximally flourishing in life, and claims that in such a case, one has too much, morally speaking. What kind of ideas are we dealing with here? Degrowth is a methodological concept that aims to establish a to-do list for what needs to be done to fix the climate crisis and social injustices. Limitarianism is a philosophical concept that aims to establish moral and ethical guidelines for having maximum limits on wealth. When we talk about capitalism and alternatives to capitalism, to avoid confusion and to remain grounded in reality, it helps to have some facts as reference. The richest 1% emit more than the poorest half of humanity combined at an average of 105 tons per person per year. The richest 10% emit half of all CO2. Meanwhile, the target line is very low at 2.3 tons per person per year. Does it not make sense that what is above the limit must come down and stay below the limit, below that red line? We already know why we have the limit in the first place. It is to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial average temperatures. Why do we have to limit warming? Because a climate that is too hot destroys the fragile balance of life. Why is the balance of life important? To keep human civilization going and flourishing. Why is that important? Why not move to another planet? Why? The chain of questions and meanings may appear endless. We enter the domain of religion, the purpose of life, the belief in the power of science and technology to solve our problems. All this makes the conversation about limits one of the most important conversations we can have. How much wealth is too much? How much production and consumption is too much? How can we innovate without destroying the planet? When the sustainable limit for the average use of materials is at 7.7 tons per human per year, and when both upper middle income earners and high income earners both exceed that limit, again it begs the question of morality. Why is this happening in the first place? Is it really true that this is the only way in which human society can organize itself, with massive inequalities, with terrible consequences for the environment and future generations? Here's how both degrowth and limitarianism make a case for the necessity of limits. Degrowth makes the case from the perspective of how the wealth of top-earning humans is made with the hard work of billions of humans at the bottom of the income distribution. This is happening because the economic system is designed in such a way that it allows the extraction of resources and cheap labor from populations without political power. This power imbalance keeps people poor. It is not their lack of hard work and intellect. Therefore, the wealthy individuals and wealthy countries must return the excess of wealth back to its origin. This wealth was never earned fair and square. It was appropriated. People actually work more in poorer countries, with an average of 45 hours per week in India, 50 hours in Sudan, compared to 30 hours in France and 27 hours in Norway. Limitarianism, as launched by Ingrid Robbins, says that wealth above a reasonable limit has at least two bad effects on society. The first is that wealth undermines the ideal of political equality. Wealth gives too much political power to its owners. Rich people can buy and influence politicians. They can finance elections to serve their interests. They can monopolize mainstream media with their self-interest narratives and silence the opposing views. They finance think tanks to produce research that seems scientific to establish new values in society. The second bad effect is that too much wealth for some humans leaves many other humans with unmet urgent needs. Philosopher Thomas Scanlon's rescue principle states that if you are presented with a situation in which you can prevent something very bad from happening, or alleviate someone's dire plight by making only a slight or even moderate sacrifice, then it would be wrong not to do so. Do we need to further ask, why is it wrong not to do so? Why is it wrong to prevent bad from happening? The state of the world could not be more obvious. There is extreme global poverty. The lives of the poor could significantly be improved by government-led actions that require financial resources. There are also local and global disadvantages, which are about opportunity and access to basic services. There are problems with urgent collective actions, such as climate restoration. All these require financial resources. Knowing about these things does not stop some humans to hold the idea that while all that poverty is very bad, they can still pursue the satisfaction of their insatiable appetites or desires. These people claim that there's no connection between them getting wealthy and global poverty. Some of them argue poverty can be cured by allowing everyone to try to get wealthy. Once we stop and look at the details, we see how the wealth of some is directly linked to the poverty of many. Human psychology is determined by the prevalent economic system. Insatiability is not rooted in human nature, but can be traced back to economic structures. Linking property with power in proportion, allowing unelected hierarchies to control capital, and allowing dispossession of property are the causes of this insatiable quest for wealth. The suffering of the poor is caused by the pollution of the rich. Moreover, catch-up development is not occurring. A larger share of the world's population lives in the periphery than ever before. These are the emerging and developing countries. If we look at the data side by side, we see how core countries, also known as advanced economies, shown here in blue, while they represent 14% of the population, they hold 87% of the share of global net resources. This profound injustice has clear explanations in history. It's about colonialism. It's about imperialism. It's about the design of capitalism. The effect of limits on wealth would immediately change this paradigm. First of all, both degrowth and limitarianism introduce honesty about how wealth is created. If wealth is supposed to be the reward for effort, then let it be so. Your reward should be based on your effort, not indirectly on the effort of others. Since your effort is limited, so should rewards be limited. Second, both degrowth and limitarianism recognize the universal value of life. Being born by chance in poor rural Burundi should not be more disqualifying than being born in a rich family in Manhattan. Being poor in a rich country and being rich in a poor country are also part of the world we live in. Of course, we can use other words to talk about the same problems and the same solutions. Words like sufficiency, well-being, fairness, justice. We can also say the economic system instead of capitalism. However, we are really talking about limits here in all circumstances. It is about reducing inequalities to preserve life and distribute wealth and resources fairly, but also distribute dignity fairly. Thank you for supporting me on Patreon. We can take the power away from the wealthy by supporting independent media and independent creators. It is possible, and it is already happening. Increase the peace. This system would properly replace capitalism. Let us call it the economy for life. Economic growth cannot remain the core objective.